speaking of strong opinions, more strong opinions, Microsoft versus Google. I've seen you post recently just on LinkedIn about kind of your thoughts on how the dichotomy or the difference between how Microsoft and Google are approaching manufacturing technology and manufacturers' needs. What are your opinions here? How do you summarize your opinions here?
Yeah, I'm actually going to summarize it in two conversations. Okay. So at Hannover Messe last week, I had a chance. In the interest of full disclosure, we've been working with Google on a technology called MDE, their technology called MDE. So Google is a strong believer in partners. Like, Google doesn't think they have all the answers. And so they work with lots of partners they don't have strategic partnerships with. So that is, I don't get it. There's no financial benefit for me to say anything good about Google other than we have architects where we're selling their labor to Google in consulting services. But there's no capital gain for us other than we've sold the labor. All right. Google believes heavily that there's no way that they can be the domain expert for industry. Google understands what it is they're good at and what they're not good at. That's the foundation of humility, right?
Right.
So here, Microsoft doesn't understand that. Microsoft, when they say that they work with partners, and I don't want to beat up Microsoft too much, but Microsoft's really, really good at building software, right? They're good at building things like Excel and OneNote. Microsoft is terrible at industry, and probably of all the organizations in the world, they are the most terrible. You want to know why Google is a little better at understanding the problems in industry? It's because they build shit. Microsoft doesn't actually manufacture any of their stuff. Microsoft's not in the business of manufacturing. They have partners that are in the business of manufacturing, strategic partners that they financially benefit from. But I had two conversations at Hannover Messe, both with incredibly brilliant architects. Okay. One was a guy named Clemens who's the principal architect of the new ADX platform at Microsoft. And he's like the messaging queue expert there. Brilliant dude, world-class architect, highly, highly, highly respected. Okay. And then another guy named Gregor at Google, who is also a brilliant, gifted, world-class architect. Two architects on the exact same level. Those conversations couldn't possibly have gone more different. And those conversations went differently because of the strategy and philosophy of the organizations they work in. Microsoft's philosophy, and this is the biggest issue, Microsoft they believe they know everything. And it's their blind spot. Their blind spot is they believe that, there's that famous video where the developer at Apple Days was critical of Steve Jobs, and he was like, what do you know about OpenDoc and all this stuff? And Jobs says, you can make some people happy some of the time. And then he goes in and he says, I don't need to know the value of OpenDoc. What I need to know is, does the customer want this? Right. And he tells a story about the first laser printer. And he says the reason that laser printer is amazing technology is because the customer wanted this. It printed a thing that I could go to the customer and go, do you want this? It didn't matter what the awesome technology was in the print controller. It was irrelevant. It was a tool. It was a tool to solving the customer's problem. Do you want this? Microsoft does not understand that. Google does. Google, it understands what the customer's problem is. And the customer's problem is that the customer only knows what some of their problems are. Microsoft wants to tell the customer what their problem is and then just sell them a thing for it. That's the fundamental issue. Wonderful people, brilliant, gifted people work at Microsoft. Brilliant, gifted people work at Google. But the difference is the approach, the philosophy, and the strategy. And right now, it is impossible for me to recommend to anyone that they should be working with Microsoft in industry. It's impossible. And my team was appalled when we had the conversation with Microsoft, 6 of us. When we walked away, we said, now we really know what the problem is. When I asked them, why did Azure IoT failed? You know what they said?
What?
Because no one bought it.
Right.
Honestly. Now you're the chairman of an organization. And if you were to ask your chief experience officer, hey, why did that product that we were offering to the market, why did that fail? If your CXO said to you, Well, because no one bought it.
Yeah.
What would you say? You'd say, why didn't they buy it?
Yeah. Why? What's wrong with the product?
What's wrong with the product? Microsoft said the reason it failed was because no one bought it. I'll tell you why no one bought it. Here's what happened. Up front, Azure IoT, and I don't want to bash them, but this is an important thing for the industry to understand. The values of the organizations you work with matter.
Right.
What they believe, what their mission is, what their values are, what their strategy is, and what their philosophy is, it matters. You need to ask those 4 questions. And if you get a deer in headlights, run.
Right.
Okay. So Microsoft starts with, we have the largest CRM in the world. We can get a meeting with anyone. Okay. I've got some new technology that we've invested $50 million in developing. Let's find a market. Let's find a market to exploit. You know what Google does? And AWS, by the way, let's give AWS their credit, and Snowflake. Okay. You want to know what they do?
What's that?
They start with a customer problem and they work their way back to a specific solution.
Right.
But they build that specific solution on a platform. And once they've built 10, 12, 15 solutions on one platform, now they have something they can wrap into a product to sell to more customers who have that same 12 to 15 problems. Right. Microsoft doesn't do that.
They start with the technology and they just dive straight into the technology, and they become purist about what the technology solution should be versus what the customer needed.
When I was talking to the architect at Microsoft, this guy Clemens, who by all accounts is an unbelievably gifted architect, and he is brilliant. He never once asked what the problem was. Right. When I sat down and had coffee with Gregor, our team sat down and had coffee with Gregor. All Gregor asked me about was what the manufacturer's problems were. It was glaring. It was as if Microsoft thinks they know what all the problems are, because we're Microsoft. And Google, which by the way, you would think Google would be the same way. They're not. The philosophy, the strategy is totally different. It's let's go find out what the problem is.
Right.
Yeah.
And then solve it.
Yes. Yeah. And then solve it. And then solve maybe 10 or 12 of them and package that as a solution.
Right.